Hello and welcome to The Drum. I'm Steve Kinane. Coming up, division in the opposition over the cost of asylum seekers attending today's funerals. The new viral weapons in the home loan war between the big banks. And has Julia Gillard's hospital deal neglected the mentally ill? Our panel tonight, former Liberal MP Bruce Baird, Peter Lewis from Essential Media, and in Canberra, the ABC's social media reporter Latika Burke. Well, there were emotional scenes in Sydney today as 8 victims of the Christmas Island boat tragedy were laid to rest. As the funerals got underway, a political row was unfolding over whether taxpayers should pay the costs for relatives who survived the tragedy to fly to the mainland. Shadow Immigration Minister Scott Morrison has attacked the government over the agreement, claiming it was unreasonably generous.
I think the public want to see the government show some sense when it comes to the spending of taxpayers' money. Now, any other Australian who wanted to attend a funeral for someone who died in tragic circumstances would have to put their hand in their own pocket. It's just a question of what is a reasonable request in these circumstances. I think the government has gone a bit too far with this, particularly given there are so many instances of this government spending money hand over fist, and particularly in this area.
But Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey broke ranks with his front bench colleague, saying Australia had an obligation to help the grieving families.
No matter what the colour of your skin, no matter what the nature of your faith, if your child has died or a father has died, you want to be there for the ceremony to say goodbye, and I totally understand the importance of this to those families. I think we as a compassionate nation have an obligation to ensure that we retain our humanity during what is a very difficult policy debate.
Bruce, you know Scott Morrison well. He succeeded you in the seat of Cook when you retired from federal politics. What do you make of his comments?
Look, I'm very disappointed that Scott would make these comments. It is lacking in compassion at the very time when these people have been through such a traumatic event. You know, losing family members, the least you could do is to assist them to go to the funeral. If we can't do that, there's something wrong with the Australian character, and I don't believe that's the case. At the core, Australians are generous and sympathetic and sensitive. And I think most people would support the fact that if someone dies in such tragic circumstances, we would assist them to go to the funeral.
Peter, the argument Scott Morrison seems to be putting is that they could have had the funerals in Christmas Island and the family members could have flown over there and paid their own expenses.
Look, I think Bruce is being kind to Scott Morrison. I think it was an absolutely grubby act and an abject failure of leadership. You can talk about the specifics of whether or not the airfare should have been paid, but what Morrison is really doing with this salvo is reinforcing that these poor souls are wrongdoers, and it's the whole basis of where this asylum seeker debate has got out of control. I've done a fair bit of public research on this. Most people's attitudes towards asylum seekers are based on 3 untruths. Firstly, that it's illegal to seek asylum. Secondly, that most people that seek asylum are rorting the system. 90% are found to be legitimate political refugees. And thirdly, that we're being overrun. You know, last year fewer than 1% of our immigration intake were asylum seekers arriving by boat. So, you know, this is, if you're going to have a debate about asylum seekers, you've got to start with some pretty basic principles that, you know, these people have not broken the rules. They're caught up in a system, but they're exercising a legal right to seek asylum.
Peter, another argument that resonates with people, though, is that they're jumping a queue, that they're stopping other asylum seekers who may be waiting in camps for long periods of time from coming to Australia. Is that a legitimate argument?
You talk to the UNHCR and they'll tell you that in a lot of these places there is no queue. Now, look, it's fine to have a debate about border protection. You know, it is fine. You don't want to be supporting people smugglers, but you've got to start with the basics, that these people aren't breaking the rules, they haven't done anything wrong, and they shouldn't be punished. And that flows into these sort of lines that this grub Morrison is trying to get out into the public debate today. And good on Joe Hockey for slapping him down.
Latika Burke, what's been the response in Canberra today to Scott Morrison's comments?
Yeah, well, as you've been pointing out, a very different response from Joe Hockey, Scott Morrison's own colleague, and a very marked one and a very deliberate one. I think that there, Steve, are days where politics are just not welcome, and today is one of those days. What we're seeing today is very different from the policy debate we have about what brings asylum seekers to Australia, whether the policies in place are soft or not. Now, it's perfectly legitimate to have those debates, but I think today is a day when we should forget politics and actually remember that we're all humans. And recently we celebrated, indeed on this program, politicians have celebrated the wonderful, compassionate spirit Australians have shown to victims of the Queensland floods. Now, victims of a terrible boat crash are no different victims.
Bruce, Scott Morrison previously has avoided politics on this issue. Back in December when this horrible tragedy unfolded, he said the lives of the men, women and children on these boats are as precious as our own and we mourn their loss. Now, there seems to be a shift in his tone from his comments back in December to now.
Yeah, but he's got to watch that he's not, trying to turn the Liberal Party into an Australian version of the Tea Party.